TOA, Fit Body Forever, and Fit Body Bootcamp communities. What's up, everybody? I am Robert Linkul, owner of TOA, TrainingTheOlderAdult.com, and your Director of Education with Fit Body Bootcamp. Today, I want to talk to you about a simple but often misunderstood talking point of training, which I would simply list as training intensity. Okay, something that we've recently had made here with Fit Body is our RPE, rate of perceived exertion chart, and you see that right here. This chart is designed to help our clients understand what type of intensity they should be training at, from exercise to exercise or from day to day. And that can be based on a resistance training effort, a cardiovascular muscular endurance effort, or an overall performance of the day type of effort. But let's stick with strength training and cardiovascular efforts. On this chart, you will see both a strength training and a conditioning explanation of what the 1 to 10 RPE, rate of perceived exertion efforts are. So if a deadlift option is placed on the workout for the day, and we are asking you to work up to an 8 on your rate of perceived exertion for strength training, that should be pretty hard. Basically leaving reps in reserve around 2 to 3. And or if you're a percentage individual, somewhere around an 80% effort would be appropriate for us at this point. Now, we want these efforts to be matched, and that's via the load to that intensity, to that effort that we just kind of place there based on your interpretation. Because what we don't want to do, particularly with aging populations, without training, without conditioning, coming in completely deconditioned, is find out what their 1 rep maximum is. I don't know if there'd be a quicker way to get someone hurt than to ask them, lift this load. They do it once, you put on another 10 pounds, and you just keep doing that and keep doing that until they either blow up, back comes apart, knees come apart, whatever it is, or they fail to lift. That's an extremely high risk, very low return effort. And there are much safer ways to eventually get that number. First off, train for 8 to 12 weeks and train them in a way where they start with sets of 10, and 2 weeks later they're doing sets of 8, and 2 weeks later they're doing 6s, and then 2, 4, and then 2 weeks later they're down to like singles, triples, doubles, and singles. And you build them over 3 months into an individual who has trained and put in multiple attempts, hundreds of attempts now, at eventually pulling a weight once. The return of that is that you will probably have great strength gains, and you will eventually find someone's true 1 rep maximum. And when manipulating heavy loads like that, granted there are potential risks for injuries, but there are with any lifting, anything that we do, typically somewhere between the style of training 4 and 7% is your injury risk when you're resistance training in a fitness facility, okay? Now, if you are trained appropriately, you should be just fine to be able to do that, 2 to 3 months down the line and get a relatively good idea of what someone's 1 rep maximum is. And then from there, you can then say an 80% effort equals blank. Let's say easy math, you pulled 100 pounds once. Well, 80% would be 80 pounds. Easy for us now to program for you on our RPE scale or percentage scale, whatever you might use, okay? The other option to that, and a much safer way to do this, is something that would be called a 10 rep maximum, where you would utilize a 10 rep or a rep calculator like this one provided to us by the NSCA to find what your 1, 5, 10 rep max might be. So let's go through that. If you are to pick up 70 pounds 10 times, and on your 10th pickup, you're like, I can't do any more, that's it, okay? Could not do another rep. Perfect. We're gonna go over here to 10 reps at the very top. And we're gonna slide down until we find the weight that you use. So right here, there's 67 and a half, maybe let's say 75 pounds, just for our calculations here. So we did 10 reps with 75 pounds. We're gonna slide all the way over, and that's gonna show us a 100 pound one rep. That is a estimated rep calculator. Some of these calculators, some people match these calculators very well. I would say most. Some, it's a little bit underrated, meaning myself included. If this was me, if I went to 95 pounds, I should only be able to do 95 twice, and then I should only be able to do 93 pounds 3 times, etc. I was the type of person that I could put 93 pounds on there, and I could do 4 or 5 reps, but then I would go to 95 and I'd be able to do like 3 or 4 reps, and then I go to 100 and I can only do 1. It was the strangest thing. Like, I was better at muscular endurance lifting than I was at true maximal power, maximal strength efforts, like a just one single rep as heavy as you could handle. So this will get you close. It'll give you a working range for intensity. So now if I understand my 1 rep max projected, even though I use 75 pounds, a lighter load that I did 10 reps with, I can feel relatively good about my technique staying together for 10 reps, but I didn't put my body through the stress and the potential slightly higher risk of lifting a heavier weight once. Again, as long as you're conditioned to do that, it is a very safe way to train, but we're not always seeking that with our older populations. What we are looking for is a more muscular endurance-based effort. So that's where a 6 or an 8 or a 10 rep max plus a calculator like this could be more beneficial. But now we have a working range where we could correlate. Here's a 10 out of 10 effort, right? 100%. And then there's a 90 and an 80 and a 70 and a 60. And you could kind of correlate those weights along with these perceived efforts on your RPE scale. And you would basically do that for the deadlift, for the bench press, for your overhead press, for your seated row, for your box squat or sit to stand or whatever squat variations you're doing, your big primary lifts. Now, do we need to figure that out for your bicep curl 10 rep max? No, we can just grab weights and give it a go and go, okay, that was about 10 reps, that looked good. And RPE wise there with these smaller auxiliary lifts, not as important, but our big primary lifts, 4, 5, 6 lifts, snatches, clean and presses as well, clean and jerks, all of these calculators work very, very well to assist you in doing that. And there are websites that have these calculators where you simply put in there, I did 100 pounds times 10 reps, and then it throws out a 145 1 rep, and it shows you all of your reps and your weights and the correlating loads that would go with it. For us, generally speaking, as we're working with our older populations and we're trying to improve strength, our focus is going to be somewhere between an RPE, rate of perceived exertion, between 6 and 8. 6 being that moderately heavy, and you could do 5, 6 maybe extra reps in reserve, building all the way up to that 8, which is pretty heavy, with 2 to 3 reps in reserve, and being able to do that over and over again as we work our way through our exercises. On rare occasion, we will, maybe in the deadlift, maybe in bench press or floor press, maybe in a seated row, and maybe in an overhead press, work up to some 9s and 10s on occasion to give some maximal efforts, maybe every quarter, okay, something like that, where we really push to a high finish where you could not do another rep. Intensities that match like this will produce great muscle gain, great strength gain, great bone density response, power, engagement, stability, strength, coordination. All of these efforts are going to be above that 50% marker, which in most research shows not to do a whole lot for muscle, bone, or power stimulus. If you use too light of loads and you do not find a rep count that creates an intensity somewhere around a 6, 7, 8 or higher, we're not going to get the training response that we want. Few exceptions. If you use a 4, 5, or a 6 RPE and you move that weight exceptionally fast through the concentric phases in a very dynamic fashion, single arm snatches, single arm cleans, jam ball slams, vertical tosses, side chops, release lifts. If you do that with these lighter loads, and you get a very dynamic potentiopenia, power, anti-power loss training, which ultimately produces strong people, but very powerful people. And that is another training component that we have to train for. But those lighter loads of 4 to a 6 RPE still needs to have a rep count and a speed and a velocity that is challenging enough, intense enough to produce a stimulus. Okay? If it's not challenging you, it's not changing you, to put it simple. And the reason I bring this up is that we have continued discussions about, can we use lighter loads and still get these great results? Lighter does not mean light, meaning if it's easy, whatever you're doing, if it's easy, if it's not challenging, it's not going to change you. And that's where I encourage all of you, no matter what style of lifting you're doing, no matter what phase of lifting you are into, if you want a change to occur, the said principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, does not change no matter what the training protocol is. Specific adaptations to impose demands. When the body is subject to stress and overloads of varying intensities, it will gradually adapt over time to overcome the demands placed upon it. Meaning that if you train for power, you will become more powerful. If you train for strength, you will become stronger. If you train for technique, you will become a more technical lifter, etc. Whatever you place stress and emphasis on, and particularly in these styles of training, your body will adapt to that. If there's not enough stimulus, intensity, challenge, whatever you want to call it, if there's not enough of that provided, if it's with 5 reps or with 30 reps, you are not going to create enough of a stimulus to create change. And by change, we mean improvement, or whatever outcome you are attempting to improve, to increase, to chase. You need to have the appropriate intensity to match the repetition scheme that you are placing in your regular programming on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, all of your macro, meso, and micro cycles, all the fancy words. You're always selecting loads that are going to create some stressor that creates a stimulus of change. And if you're not doing that, if your training is quote unquote easy, you're not going to get the results that you want. So keep that in mind as you work your way through each workout. What RPE, what rate of perceived exertion are we looking at from a strength, but also from a conditioning standpoint? A 10 out of 10 on conditioning means maximal effort. I cannot speak. I am huffing and puffing at a level that I am barely staying on my feet. Where a 6, you're going to have a high heart rate, right around 60% of your ultimate effort, somewhere in the 60s, but you're capable of repeating this almost any time that I ask you to do it, and along the boards. Okay, use these RPE scales or RIRs, reps in reserve, or percentages based on your calculator charts. Utilize these tools to help you gauge the levels of intensity in which you train at, because if it's not challenging you, it's not changing you. I hope you all enjoyed this one today. Any comments, questions, hit me up in the comment section down below. And as always, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, help us grow the channel. We much appreciate it here at TOA. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one. Until next time, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. Take care.